Ah, that was a quick class, wasn't it? Uh, just to go around the room on those that need our prayers. Yesterday, Jason's dad had the memorial service for him. Also, Jason recovering from surgery, Addison recovering from surgery. So that family really needs our prayers. The Moody's, Kevin continues to be sick. Brother Terry appears to be more good days than bad now, but he still needs our prayers. Changing the medicines and doctors fighting with the insurance companies to try to do what they can to. Oh, the doctor won. It's been approved. That's great news. Great news. Uh, 31st is his first infusion, so let's make sure we keep him in our prayers on that. Tina has had a pretty rough week. Charles is down on the oxygen. He goes back on the 31st also, right? So okay, and he's on some new medication. Holly has been to endocrinologist and about her issues, and they were doing some additional tests to make sure there's not another problem that sort of mirrors it and goes along with it. Make sure she's getting treated the way she's supposed to. Still having back issues. Addition to that, the Fullers, Dot's been having some pretty rough time with after her chemo treatments. Um, Angel's dad on. Okay, so they did decide on surgery. Okay, so let's keep her dad and the family in our prayers. Is that all on the sick and injured? Amy. In addition to what was announced Wednesday night about asthma, it's also some pneumonia in each lung. So the pneumonia probably is what touched off the asthma. So but let's keep her in our prayers. Uh, we had also mentioned about Scott Ingram planning a trip to France, school sponsored trip over there, and he was needing some help. Already received some money, and very thankful for that. And if anybody else wants to give to that, if you'll just give it to me, I can give it to Jeremy and let him deposit the checks and send one check up there. Or if you just want to make out your contribution check and then earmark so much down in that little block that says for, we'll take care of it that way also. Anything else? We'll be in Matthew chapter 13. Matthew chapter 13. And if you would, Brother Joel, would you lead us in a prayer, please, before we begin? Chapter 13, Christ is teaching in parables, and I'm going to start out with a little story before we even start looking at chapter 13, because I believe that some of us older folks can understand this chapter better than younger folks because we lived it. We gardened for a living. You know, we had to grow our own food. And the story I'm going to start with is to give you a sort of example. Andrew and I, after we'd been married a few years and got transferred down to Memphis, Tennessee, bought a house, and that was the first opportunity that we had then to grow a garden. And so we'd gone home, and my dad had an old tiller. Uh, it needed to be a boat anchor. That's how old and beat up it was. But anyway, we took it back to Memphis. I tilled us up a little spot, and I planted. And I know how to do a garden, so I'd done the preparation correct and everything, and planted. And as things started to grow up, it started raining. It seemed like it rained every day for a month or two. I know that's a slight exaggeration, but every time I'd go out to do what I was supposed to and take care of the garden and get the grass and all out, you step in it and you bury up to your knees almost. So it was too wet to go in, and so after about after it got up so high and it was just totally consumed with grass, I said, forget it. I didn't even go out and do any more in it. And of course, we didn't eat anything out of the garden that year. And that's the last attempt I had made at gardening. But I said that so we can get a real good idea of what's going on here when we talk about the parables and the sowers. Chapter 13, verse 1 says, the same day went Jesus out of the house and sat by the seaside, and great multitudes were gathered together unto him, so that he went into a ship and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. And he spake many things unto them in parables, saying, and before we get into what he said was, we've gone through this once before, but with him being down on the shore and the crowd being around him and wanting to get closer and closer and hear him, he had to get in a boat and push off a little ways so he could speak to everybody. And so he was sitting and talking to him, and he said, behold, a sower went forth to sow. We're going to go through this, and then when down to about verse 11, we're going to come up with some explanations. But he said, and when he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. Some fell upon stony places where they had not much earth, and forthwith they sprung up, because they had no deepness of earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprung up and choked them out. But others fell into the ground, good ground, and brought forth fruit, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. And the disciples came and said unto him, why speakest thou unto them in parables? All right. So we're going to start there, and then we'll go back and look at those things. But why would it be best to speak in a parable even today if we're trying to teach somebody something that they don't know? Put it in terms they can understand or relate to. When I had to teach in the military, and John's been a teacher also, and I'm sure he did the same thing, even though he may not have known it. You start with what they know, and then you go into the unknown. So you have to build on what they know. You've got to have a foundation of knowledge and go from there. So with him speaking in parables, especially the sower, planting and all, like I say, people my age, thereabouts, and older, or some a little bit younger, that was our culture. That's what we did. We didn't live in the city. We had to farm. We had to raise our own food. So when I read this and when I first heard this, it all made sense to me because I knew that end of it. You take somebody that come from the city and didn't know a blade of grass from a weed, they're lost unless you break things down to them a little bit simpler and have them understand. So by him speaking in parables, what is a parable? I'm sorry? Earthly story with a heavenly meaning. That's pretty good. because that's what he's getting at, is if I teach them this so they'll know that, then they can easily relate to the spiritual meaning of it. So he's speaking in parables for that reason. And then he said, because it is given unto you to know the mystery of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. What does that mean? He's speaking to some of his disciples here. What's given to them that's not given to the regular person? Okay. They were going to be the first instructors, weren't they, into what was going to take place. So they had been given a little additional insight into what was going on so that they could relate it to other people. And it says, for whosoever saith to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundantly. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away, even that he hath. Let me read that whole thing again. For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away, even that he hath. What does that mean? Because that's what's going on in the United States of America today. If you listen to the media and listen to what we refer to as the talking heads, you have this political party that says, well, this group, all they want to do is make the wealthy wealthier and the poor poorer. So isn't that what this verse is saying? That that's the right thing to do? What does it mean then? He's just gone through the parable of the sowers and where he's moving things around. And Brother Terry, if you didn't hear him say, he's making a spiritual application. And the spiritual application would be this. What is the duty, the responsibility of everybody that becomes a Christian? Grow and teach others. If you don't grow, what's happening? You're dying. So that's the spiritual application is we each, even today, I don't care. I've been a Christian over 50 years, 55 years going on. I have no less responsibility today than I did 55 years ago about reading and studying and learning and growing and trying to teach somebody else. And we've used this example over and over and over again, but it is so applicable that your mind is like a sponge. It's either absorbing or it's dehydrating. There is no status quo. You're never at a pause point, because if you don't use, you do what? You lose. So that to me is the application. Verse 13 says, therefore speak I to them in parables, because they, seeing not and hearing, they hear not, neither do they understand. So he can't just go into something and teach them, because they would have no basis. They wouldn't have any understanding of it at all. And then verse 14 says, and in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, by hearing ye shall hear and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see and not perceive. How many times have you, and we'll use TV today since we're also familiar with that, how many times have you seen something happen on TV? You see it happen, you know it happens, but you have no earthly idea how it happens or the application. And I can use this little thing right here. I know how it works. I have zero understanding of how it works. It amazes me that with the millions of phones there are in the United States, how somebody anywhere in the world can dial the number that's assigned this thing and it will reach me and nobody else unless there's a malfunction. Each one of us in here that has one of these devices, it could all ring at the same time. We could all be having a different conversation with somebody different, and it's all up there in the airways. How does it not get confused? How does it get from point A to point B? I have no understanding of that. It would take somebody like Joel into computers, and he'll probably spend the rest of his life, if I were to live that long, trying to explain it to me. He understands data and stuff like that. I don't. So that's where we are. Verse 15 says, "And for this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and should understand with their hearts, and should be converted, and I should heal them." What does it mean to wax gross? Shut down, not really pay attention, not understand, not want to understand. See, I'm one of these people that even at the age, I'll be 70 this year, at the age of 70, if I see something, well, Andrea she doesn't say it much about me anymore, but she used to say quite a bit, if you want something done, tell him he can't do it. Because I wanted to figure out how it worked. I still want to figure out how things work. I still want to learn. So when I ask a lot of questions, I'm really picking your brain. I'm trying to learn things. But these folks had gotten to the point where, well, that's too complicated. I just, you just handle it. I don't want to deal with it. And then he says, "But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear." So here Christ is talking again to the disciples that they have some little bit of understanding and that they're growing in that. "For verily I say unto you that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which ye see, and have not seen them, and do hear those things which ye hear, and have not heard them. Hear ye therefore the parable of the sower." So he's just getting them set up saying, okay, you're ready to learn. These others are not. So you're ready to learn. So here's what the story is all about that I just told you. And then he starts out with verse 19. "When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not, then cometh the wicked one and catcheth away that which was sown in his heart. This is he which received seed by the wayside." So seed by the wayside, if we go back to the parable he told, what would be seed by the wayside? We talked about preparing, tilling, and getting the ground ready for planting. So what would be the wayside? Right, that would be in the fringe area there. I mean, nobody intentionally sows in unprepared ground, but as you're moving along, a lot of times some will get into the fringe area. So that's what he's talking about. So for those in the fringe area, if we relate that then to someone who hears the word of the kingdom, they're in the fringe, they may be very new to it, they don't understand it, they've heard it, they want to learn, they don't understand it, but then the wicked one comes and takes it away quickly. How does that work? Who's the wicked one? Or one of his minions, okay, directed by him anyway. So how do they take away the excitement or the desire that these folks had to hear and understand? Okay. I think a good example of what you're saying is this. Somebody comes for, and first time they've ever been in the building, first time they've ever heard the word of God. Strange to them. They like what they hear. They want to learn a little bit more about it. They don't understand it, but they're there. Then they go home, and friend Joe comes over and says, that's a bunch of hooey. Let's go out and have a party. In other words, they remove it quickly because they replace it with something else that is physically desirable to old Joe. Yes, sir. Hmm. Right. Correct. Correct. So with it being out there on that fringe area, uh, it's very easy then for anything, birds or whatever, to come and carry it away. Uh, but the spiritual application is then if somebody were to come in here and hear it, then somebody comes along and diverts their attention and gets them into something else. Uh, and it's easy to do when they're first getting started that way. Yes, sir. Right. It just said that he heard it. So that's where we're just on the very outer fringe there. And if you don't quite understand it, if you would and go out and plant some seed and then just throw a dusting of dirt, cover the seed that you want to grow, look back and look and see how quickly it seems like I'm going to get it before it has a chance to do anything. It's kind of that way too, isn't it? And the quicker he can get to you, the easier his job is. The next one then says, "But he that received the seed uh, into stony places, the same as he that heareth the word and anon, or right away with joy received it." Now this one, we never planted oats or a barley or anything like that, which is sort of a broadcast and just a big field. Everything that we planted was in rows. I'm more familiar with row planting than I am anything else. I'm more familiar with corn than I am barley or wheat or oats. So I'm going to move it into that area of row planting. And to me, instead of the stony ground, it's what was said here about the packed. If you're row planting, you till everything, but then when you get your rows prepared, you've got a pathway, a row, a pathway, a row, a pathway. So that packed, the hard, would be like the stony. It's not going to take root there because it's so densely packed where you've been walking. And also, there might even be a stone or two in there because you didn't bother to throw them out of getting everything else prepared. But the ones in the stony place, as Brother Terry was saying, they're the ones that heard it and received it and wanted to know more. They were very eager, but their foundation, they didn't have anything that they could take root on. And again, Satan is going to come in and move as quickly as he can to take you from that. And pretty soon, because there's no root, there's no way to get water. And if there's no water, as soon as the sun comes up, it's going to bake and go away. Yes, sir. Okay, that's fine. Uh, but here, with them receiving that seed in the stony place, that's just a very shallow root. And again, if you want to equate it to somebody coming in here, uh, now they're here the second time, they're eager, they're wanting to learn. And if someone doesn't take them under their wing, which is the first place we went, if someone doesn't take them under their wing and study with them and nurture them and grow them, what's going to happen? They're going to go away because they've got no roots. Verse 21 says that, and yet hath he not root in himself, but dureth for a while. For when tribulation or persecution arises because of the word, by and by he is offended. So without root, you really can't take as much kidding or carrying on as you can if you're deep rooted. Verse 22 says, he also that received seed among the thorns is he that heareth the word, and the care of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and he becometh unfruitful. That's why I went into my story. Thorns didn't take over, but grass took over, which is the same thing. It choked out the good because I couldn't get in and take care of it. This, if you notice, we start here going from the very, very, very shallow, and now we work our way into the deep root. So we're at the stage now where even somebody that has been learning and desiring, the world comes in and takes over because they make it more desirous. You look around today, how many, kind of going to put you on the spot here, but if you look around today, among those that profess to be Christians, how many, regardless of which building you go to, and I'm going to use Christian in the worldly generic sense here, those not just the Church of Christ, but those that of all denominations that profess to follow Christ, you walk into any building today during their worship time, and you count the number of people in there, and then you say, can you give me a list of your members? Using members generically, those that want to worship together. How many buildings are you going to find that's 100%? How many are you going to find that's 90%? 80%? 70%? Do I need to keep going? Aren't those being choked out? How, if you miss one service, do you feel bad? If you miss a second one in a row, do you feel bad? How long does it take before you're not feeling so bad? Well, I missed this morning. It'll be all right if I miss this afternoon too. I missed this week. It'll be okay. Or I missed last week. They won't miss me one more week. Who's missing whom? What is my responsibility to worry about you missing me? What should be my concern? Commander-in-Chief. He's the one I need to be concerned about. Now, don't get me wrong. I left here early Wednesday night because I wasn't feeling good, and I had a number of people inquire about me, and I'm very thankful for that. It's great that we check on each other and are concerned about each other. but don't think that's the main point we're getting at right here. Then verse 23 says, "But he that receiveth seed into the good ground is he that heareth the word and understand it, which also beareth fruit and bringeth forth some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. Now, why isn't everything 100-fold? Why do we have 100, 60, and 30 referred to? Bingo. Not everyone has the same ability as others. We all have our abilities, and we can all do things. Sort of goes back to the body, not when it's comparing the body. Not everything can be a hand, not everything can be a foot. They all work together for the good of the whole, but each one has a different function. And wasn't going to do it, but I am anyway. How many of you in here have ever grown anything? Not well, a few. Ear of corn, thing I'm most familiar with. Ear of corn. How many rows are there on each ear of corn? Nobody know? No. On an ear of corn, how many rows, how many kernels are there on? How many rows of kernels are there on an ear of corn? They go lengthwise. Is there what? Well, within parameters, there's a set amount. It is very, very, very rare to find an odd number. They generally are 12, 14, or 16. Now, how many kernels on each row? Well, what determines the length of it is how much nutrient it gets and how it grows and all. There's somewhere around 40 to 44, an average. So if you multiply that, how many kernels are there on each ear of corn? If you have, let's just say you have a minimum of 12 rows on an ear, and you have a minimum of 40 kernels on that ear, how many kernels are there on one ear of corn? Well, 480 if you do it that way, but roughly 500. Let's just round it off to 500. How many ears of corn are there on each stalk of corn? I heard 3. I'm sorry? 2 or 3? Some say 5. Generally speaking, if they're grown for if you're growing to sell, you're growing it closer together than you would if you were just normally growing it for your own food. The closer together you grow it, the fewer ears you have because of the nutrients. So you're going to have an average of 1 to 2. But let's just say you have 2 on that stalk. It's the same as the first ear. The one grain, the one kernel of corn that you planted in that soil gives you about 1,000 kernels to eat or to plant again. If we then move that over to the Christian and to the religious aspect of it, I'm a kernel of corn and I'm planted. If my stalk of corn comes up bare, I have produced 0 fruit. If I produce 2 ears of corn on that, and those 2 ears are planted, it doesn't take long before you can see how it multiplies. Let's just say that first stalk that first kernel that was planted, you don't need anything off of it, because when I was growing up, the first thing you did, you ate in the summer, but you also set aside apart for the fall, for the next year's planting. So that 1 year, instead of one kernel that you had, now you can plant 1,000 seed of corn. Not all of them, about 80% of them will come up, but still, instead of the one plant, now you've got 800 plants. That's how it's all designed to spread and grow. And I think that's what we're getting down to at the bottom line here. In the 160 and 30 are, again, the more competition you have, the less you're going to be productive. And also, everybody has a different talent, so you're not going to produce as much. Is all that? Yes, sir. You have still been productive, absolutely. Questions or comments on this section? Did you like your gardening lesson? Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. And when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. Tares or weeds or such. So the servants of the householder came and said to him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? Okay. Again, this story is very plain that somebody came in and sabotaged his field. But the story that I had, I couldn't get in to weed it out. Where did those weeds come from? Because I had tilled it, I had prepared it, I had removed all the grass roots and everything else. I mean, it was perfect. So where'd the grass come from? Where'd the weeds come from? It happens. Birds fly over and drop a seed, and all of a sudden it sprouts. Wind blows it in, it sprouts. Weed is the fastest growing thing on the planet. Let me take that back. Kudzu is the fastest growing thing on the planet. But again, that just goes that if you do a lot of gardening, don't you? You can go out there one day and you can walk through that place and it be spotless. What happens 5 days later when you go back? It is not spotless anymore. But you know what I'm talking about. The weeds grow fast, and I liken that, just what we're talking about here, if you change that to a spiritual aspect. What grows faster in somebody's heart? Relationship to God or relationship to the world? Depends on how they've prepared their heart. That's the reason I like Isaiah 7:10 so much. He prepared his heart to go learn about it. So, but still, if it's not prepared and focused and dedicated and you work at it, the world takes over very rapidly. And that's here with the tares. But he had said unto them, an enemy hath done this. The servant said unto him, wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? And he said, nay, lest while you gather up the tares, you root up also the wheat with them. Back to you. Have you ever been trying to get a weed out and chop down a good plant? Yeah. They just bury under and If you'd have done this, I'd have worried about me, because I know but also it's necessary at times to remove some of the good, to thin out and give everything space to grow. But he said, Nay, lest while we gather up the tares, you root up the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and in the time of harvest I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into the barn. Now, like I say, I have very little knowledge of wheat and oats and barley and stuff like that, so I guess that would work. Well, I know it would work because it said so. But I know in a garden, if you allow the bad to grow with the good, you're not going to have any good. It's not hardly going to be worth it. It's just going to absolutely take over. So that application you have to do a little studying on. Well, if I were going to try to compare it, I would compare it to a thing that us Southerners have around here that we detest in the way of grass, and that would be nut root, because it's as bad as dandelions and everything else. You can take that stuff up by the handsfuls and scrub around, and there's nothing there. And it seems like if it was ever infested with nut root grass, it takes years to get it out. I mean, it grows fast and it just spreads. Hmm. Yes, sir. And if you, since we're going down that road, what is the terror in the world today? Well, I think it's the computer, the internet. Not fussing at your job or anything, but what happens? What are most people in the world today addicted to? I heard Facebook, porn, social media. We can go on and on, but it all relates to that thing called the World Wide Web, the internet that has been out there. It detracts more people from doing what they need to be doing. Uh, you can go sit down in a restaurant today, and while you're eating your meal, you can look over at another table, and it might be two young people out on a date, even some teenagers. They're sitting on opposite sides of the table looking at that little electronic device instead of eyeball to eyeball communication. I'd heard the word porn mentioned. How many people today are addicted to porn that wouldn't have been prior to the easy access to it? Sure, they had magazines you could, but it is just so easy and so accessible today that it's to me that's the terror of the world today, and that's just my opinion. But yes, sir. Brother Clunch, you have your hand up a minute ago. Okay, that's a good point for us to stop and start on Wednesday night to complete that thought on tears. Thank y'all for your comments and your attention.